is typical of this.
Sorry about that.
Okay, want me to start again?
Sure.
Okay, we'll start again. So thank everybody for coming. We're going to talk a little bit about New York, Ontario, and Western. As I said, it's the Elvis Presley of railroads, and people that are obsessed with it, even though it's been gone for 67 years. And it started out as the New York Oswego Midland. Right after the Civil War, it went bankrupt, as many railroads did during the bank panics in the 1870s, was reorganized in 1880 as the New York, Ontario, and Western Railway. And it's a very contrarian railroad in a lot of ways, one of which was that in 1932, when pretty much every railroad was losing money during the Depression, they actually made a profit. They went bankrupt in 1937. The O&W, like many of the roads in that area, depended heavily on anthracite coal shipments. And by the late 30s, oil was already replacing coal. People preferred to just have a tank of fuel delivered to their house as opposed to take something out of a coal scuttle. And another thing unusual about them is they lasted in bankruptcy for 20 years. That's almost unheard of. So on March 29th, 1957, the plug was pulled, the railroad shut down, all the equipment went to Norwich and Middletown, and that was the end. That was the last train order. And over the next 6 or 7 years, it was scrapped in different locations. There are a few pieces of it that survive to this day. The section from Fulton to Oswego, New York is still in use. That was taken over by the New York Central. There is a short section in New Hartford, near Utica, a very short section that basically services a couple of industries, connects where the old West Shore was and what's now the Susquehanna and Western. And of course, the track that runs from the Graham line, Erie Graham line, down to the what was the Middletown in New Jersey, which is now, I guess, is it East Penn running it, or I'm not sure who runs it now. But all of that sets the table for what is done here, and that was to kind of explore what was left of the O&W. So where did we get this crazy idea? Well, I've been fascinated with it for over 60 years. 1962, I started visiting a property. My father remarried in 1962, and I started visiting a family property in Forestburg, New York. Forestburg is very close to where the Monticello and Port Jervis, and later the Port Jervis and Monticello Railroad ran. It ran behind our property. We had to go back about 1.5 miles or so to find the right of way. And we would hike across it frequently. And I would ask, well, what is this long grassy strip? Where'd it grow? And so my stepmother would say, well, that was the O&W. And it went bankrupt. And it was a noisy, smelly train. And I'm glad it's not around anymore. And some others, like my grandfather, step-grandfather, who was a surgeon in Brooklyn and a congressman, would say sometimes he would take the train to St. Joseph's or Gilman Station and get off there and get picked up. So I joined the O&W Railroad Historical Society back in the 1990s. And I came across what they called the bus tour guides. They would actually, back in that day, literally get a bus, put a bunch of people on it, and they would travel along the right of way of the O&W, and they would stop to visit station sites and bridges and culverts and viaducts and tunnels. My son Ross, who may be watching tonight, I don't know, he lives in Los Angeles. He was developing interest in old railroads. And I was very fortunate to work back in the early 90s on the Steel and Steam film that runs at Steamtown. Have any of you seen that? Okay, probably recognize the guy who was working as a station agent. It was me. And the little kid who was me at a later age was my son Ross. So we went to places like the East Broad Top and up to Minnesota and Wisconsin and up through Scranton to do reenaction. So he was really into it. So I'm also a longtime fan of the DL&W. As much as I have on the O&W, I have stacks and stacks of books and maps and paraphernalia on the DL&W. I rode the Phoebe Snow a year before it stopped running as a Lackawanna train, as a class trip. And then in the early 1980s, and this may be a project that the Society may want to do something with, I decided to go out and document a lot of what was left of the DL&W, the Susquehanna Western, Lehigh and Hudson River, because Conrail was busy scrapping all the tracks. So places like Greendale and Sparta and down to Great Meadows. And it really drove home the point. It shows you how fast Mother Nature reclaims what was once hers. And I thought, you know what, it's probably worth revisiting the O&W again. So the goal was to start at Cornwall and go at least as far as Cadosia, because again, this is a 500-mile with all the branch lines railroad. and explore some of the branch lines of the Port Jervis and Monticello branch lines in the summers of 1997 and 1998. So we didn't get to all of it, but we did cover a lot of ground. So we'd start at Cornwall, head west to Cadosia, and I have a brother. My late brother was a planner. He lived in Saugerties, New York, and he was also instrumental in getting the O&W rail trail started up there that goes from Kingston down to as far as Kerhonkson, and they're still extending it. And he had a collection of maps going back to the first USGS maps in the 1890s. So he made large copies of them, and he would circle bridge sites, station sites, show where the tracks ran. Very, very helpful. We didn't get photos of everything, only highlights and areas of interest. So many of these the photos are posted to the society webpage. This is the O&W Society, as what we call the virtual bus tour, because we have a lot of members that don't live anywhere near Middletown, New York, or Norwich, or Oneida, or Oswego. But they live all over the US, and some live overseas, but they wanted to be able to see what was left of the railroad. We were very surprised at just how much of the right-of-way could still be found 40 years after abandonment. And we had a few adventures along the way. So this really was a father-son bonding trip. And I know a lot of the presentations that you've seen are old photos of old trains and rolling stock and stations and things. And you're not going to see really any trains and rolling stock and things like that. You're going to see stations and tunnels and grassy areas and bridges and what was once a thriving, busy railroad at one time. So Ross was game to come along and explore the old right-of-ways, wade through water, brambles, and poison ivy, because we did run into a lot of that. So in July 97, we set out with our maps and water and started in Cornwall. So here's a USGS map. By the way, if you ever want to see any maps from a certain time period, the USGS has a website. Just Google Get Maps. It'll take you to something called Topo View. They have a copy of every map they have ever printed from 1893 on. And they're in beautiful condition. And you can download them as JPEGs, TIFFs, and other file formats. Very helpful. So this is from 1943. Here's Cornwall. And there are the tracks coming off the West Shore. The O&W was instrumental in getting the West Shore up and off the ground. And climbing slowly up the hill, following the river, and up here is Firthcliffe. There was a carpet factory here. And after abandonment, this section of track was still in use for a while by the New York Central to service the carpet mill. And here's Orrs Mill Trestle. Orrs Mill Trestle, there's pictures that have been posted on Facebook on a couple of the railroad user sites. Somebody is building a house on the west pillar of the trestle, and they're using the actual footing, bridge footing, as a foundation for a basement, which is, that'll never come down. But if the kids step out the wrong window, yeah. So here's where we started. When we got there, wow, the trumpets blared, and like, oh, okay, it's a chained off yard for a bunch of semi-trailers. But these gates are approximately where the tracks ran. And as of 1997, it was just a storage yard for semi-trailers and trucks. And here's pretty much where the tracks ran going up the hill. That's my erstwhile Volvo. Got 240,000 miles on it. We finally scrapped it, but it was great for driving around and doing this. Today, Shore Road parallels the right-of-way up the hill towards Route 9W. The right-of-way is very easily seen on Google Maps. Shore Road is the old New York 32. The new New York 32 is to the west of there. So, okay, this is where it gets tricky. You're driving along the road, and I can spot these. He got better at it. And I'd say, what do you think, Ross? We walk back there, sure, it's all graded. So this is roughly where the tracks crossed Old 32, right about where the mill property is. And the mill property is gone. Everything's been taken down. There was a track that went in there to switch it. It went under a tunnel, short tunnel, under the access road to the carpet mill. Now, if you go up 94, New York 94, from Vales Gate to Meadowbrook, you'll see this, and you'll think it's a power line right away. Well, it is, but this is also the O&W. And right here in the woods, and you can find the foundations for it, is where the O&W Meadowbrook station used to be. And you can also find a large concrete tank full of water that was also used to water the engines. There was a pump there. So what happened was this went under the old 94. And it was two tracks up through here. And back in the 80s, New York State went through and took a lot of these overpasses out. These bridges have been there a long time and they just filled it in. So there's no underpass here anymore. But if you hike down this right away, all the way to the end, you'll run into a girder bridge. And the girder bridge in the woods is the Erie Newburgh Branch, which is still being used to carry fiber optic and utility cables. And my understanding now is they're trying to convert that into a trail. So it'd actually be a walking trail. That branch was taken out. It was shut down in 1977. And about the same time, the Erie stopped running trains through Goshen and Middletown and went to the Graham line is when they scrapped that track. So you get good at this. You're driving along Jackson Road here and I see this, okay? And I had to look over my shoulder to spot it. What is that? Well, Ross right away. That's got to be the right of way. Yep, that's exactly it. That's where the tracks came across. If you go on Google Earth and you look, you will see a big U-shaped hook to cross the Ores Mills trestle. Then it disappears into the woods. Then it materializes again around Jackson Avenue. You can clearly see the right of way. So we're looking south. Right of way is somewhat visible on Google Earth, largely overgrown today. Now, a little bit further west at Burnside, this is the right of way. And this is now a power company utility. The station still exists, but it's been moved from its original location to a whole different location. And Ray Kelly took me on a trip up to it once, and he said that they frequently get visitors knocking at the door, asking about, we want to see the station, and it's a private residence, so they don't really appreciate that. But at least it was saved. So they had a Y here and a junction with the Lehigh and Hudson River. All right, so this is what the Lehigh and Hudson River right-of-way looked like not long after the tracks were scrapped. This is going towards Maybrook Yard. So we're obviously standing on the Graham line. We're going to take a little side trip here now and then. The right-of-way is in great shape. I mean, it looks like they pulled the tracks up yesterday, and I'm not sure anybody here knows when that line was actually scrapped north of the Graham line, but I believe it was only a few years before we were up there. So now we're in Campbell Hall. Okay, Campbell Hall, which is a pretty sleepy little town, was once a major rail hub. So you had the Central New England, which is the New Haven. You had the Montgomery Branch, which is the Erie, which connected to the Walkill. You had the Lehigh New England coming in to go up to Maybrook. You had the O&W. You had the Erie Graham line. All of this was going on as recently as 1957. And of course, now all you have is the Graham line, and you have the Montgomery Branch. The rest of it, and of course down to Metro North and the yard down here. So in Maybrook, during World War II, was the busiest freight yard east of the Mississippi. They had 70 tracks, and they have one now. And Yellow Freight took it over, and Yellow Freight just went bankrupt. So I'm not sure what's going to happen to it. We decided to take a side trip up there. So here's the Montgomery Branch, still in use. It's actually in better shape today. This is the O&W crossing right here, and that used to be a station site. And there was a tower just behind me. So a little bit further up the tracks, looking towards Montgomery, and that is the old Erie and New Haven lead going into Maybrook Yard. It's still in use. There's still some customers at the north end of Maybrook Yard on the old New Haven. There are a couple of sidings up there, but there's no real yard work being done there at all. But it is still being serviced. And that's it. That's what's left of it. So Ross is standing next to that's the New Haven main line. And we're just north of the large yard. So all the way up here, past the woods, just the other side of Interstate 84, there's a couple of businesses that are still getting rail shipments. And of course, Maybrook Yard was doomed when the Poughkeepsie Bridge burned in 1974. It's no secret that Penn Central wanted to get rid of it. It was very expensive to maintain it. The Coast Guard was on their case about clearances and warning lights and everything else. So the story is that when it burned, the water lines going to the top were disconnected. So there was no way to put the fire out. So whether they were happy that it burned, they could reroute everything to Selkirk, nobody really knows. And this is looking the other way back towards Campbell Hall from the Route 208 bridge. So again, this is the Central New England, New Haven, and Erie and Lehigh, New England access. And even the New York Central. I've seen a couple of pictures of New York Central locomotives in Maybrook Yard coming over the Montgomery Branch. Now, just east of the Graham Line Bridge, here's the O&W tracks. This is now a hiking trail that goes up to the Graham Line Bridge, and it's called O&W Bridge. and it was called that by the Erie. So it's called the Hamptonburg Preserve. And just east of here, when we were exploring it, we realized it was wide enough for a 3-track yard, which is not really well known about the O&W, but it's believed that that would have been a staging area for trains going in and out of Maybrook. Now, driving along this road, which we could barely get under this girder, this is Slaughter Road. Why is this girder still here? This is 40 years after abandonment. It's still there. There's nothing on top of it. So you have to be very careful if you walked on it because you'd fall right through. Now, today it's gone. This retaining wall is still in. This retaining wall was built by the O&W. That was taken out. This road was widened. You wouldn't recognize it. It's 2 lanes. It's paved, and it's a major access road. But that's the original stonework. So on one side it survives, the other side it's gone. And here's what the bridge looks like. So it's not exactly something you'd want to put a ATV on, because if you weren't careful, you go right over the side. If you walked across, you could fall through. And we found this in several places along the road, that there were just structures left there for no particular reason. Why wouldn't they scrap this? And I don't know what the reason was, because there was no service at this point. Now we're on Mechanicstown Station, Dunning Road. Jesus. This is the O&W right away. This building is gone, burned down. I think it was a hotel or a club or something there. So it's just a vacant lot now. And we're just east of the Interstate 84, 17, I-86 Cloverleaf, which when it was built, just obliterated the right of way. There's nothing left of it. So at this point, the O&W begins a curve to the south, just west to access Middletown. I'll show you a map of that. A little busy, but here's where that picture was, right about here. This is Interstate 84 coming through, and 17 goes this way. So the O&W dips to the south and then curls back into town, and there's the massive O&W Middletown yards. And the Erie Graham line is coming in from the south, or not the Graham line, the old Erie line, the Erie Main, and hooks around here. And then there's the Graham line in the old Main and the Middletown of New Jersey heading south. So again, this is from 1943. You can find this map online. If you want to go up and explore it, they're very, very helpful. So here we are in Middletown. And there's some rails left here. And it looks pretty sad. I mean, this was the nerve center of the O&W. Their offices were in New York City for years. Then they moved them to Middletown Station to save money. But the rails were a little polished when we were there. So Conrail was servicing a few businesses to the south. And the MNNJ was also servicing businesses to the south. So there's a lot of history around this building, and it looked great 40 years after abandonment. But I'm going to show you what it looked like 20 years after abandonment, when we were up there in August of 1977. Yep, there was a nightclub. There was a beneficial finance office here. The benches are still here. The station master window ticket office was still there, but they put a nightclub in the bottom of it. So again, let's go back one. Whoops. Okay, so that's 1997. And you'll notice something else that's interesting. They actually cleared out a lot of this on the side. It was starting to turn into a jungle. 20 years later, somebody came through and cleaned it out. Now, some of you know this building burned. I'll show you the side that burned almost 20 years ago. And this is the morning that we set off. We stayed overnight in Middletown. We set off to make it to Kadosia, which was a long day. The semaphore was still there. Is the semaphore still in place?
It's gone, but it's been preserved.
It's been preserved. And where's the clock? Nobody seems to know.
Was stolen.
Somebody stole the clock.
Yeah.
That's a shame. Anyway, so the rails are a little bit rustier, but there's still trains running on this line. They don't go down very far. And this is the north end. This is the side that had the fire. So you may have seen that. That was what,
2004, so 20 years ago.
It's 20 years ago. Horrible fire up here, burned down. But the city of Middletown now owns a station, and they're going to restore it, which is great because it's a beautiful station. That's the backside. And there were people living in here. There were some offices in here. So, you know, there's potential for reusing the property, mixed use possibly, but the building is built like a tank. So if it can't be restored, it's in really, really good shape, aside from the fire damage. And again, there are the benches. Okay, and there's the station master's window. Now, I don't remember, we shot this photo in 1977. I believe this is the first plaque because the plaque got stolen. So there's another one here, but it explains all about the railroad. And this is the Adams Freight Building, and I don't know what it's being used for, but there's a fan with ventilation up here. And there was a ramp. Somebody put a gravel ramp in, so somebody was using it to store something. And it's in great shape. Just a little bit of graffiti on it. I'm surprised there's not more graffiti on it, to be honest with you. They put a really heavy steel door in. This, I believe, was glass at one time. That's all been boarded up, and then there's a cement. And you can still see railroad ties in front of the building. Now, a little bit further north is Middletown Yard, and this is the yardmaster's office. And this building has seen use as many different things over the years. It was in good shape in 1997, although its function wasn't obvious. Now, I don't know who was using it in 1997. There is a historical marker here that explains what it was used for. But if we go back 20 years, it was being used as a Baptist church, which is certainly one of the more unusual uses that I've seen for a yardmaster's office or any railroad building. So again, 1977. And, oops, I keep hitting the wrong button here. There we go, 1997. And again, the yard got cleaned up a little bit. You notice again, here it's a little overgrown. Here it's in a little bit better shape. I don't know if that was weed control by Conrail or the M&NJ or somebody was taking care of it. Okay, this is looking south from the same location. This is part of the lumber yard that's here, and I think they're still getting shipments. They're still getting shipments by rail?
Yes.
Yes.
The M&NJ, it used to be up until 2017 that the NS would run a job from Campbell Hall down, from Suffern and deliver to the M&NJ in Middletown, the old M&NJ DG yards.
Yeah.
Now the M&NJ actually has tractor tracks all the way.
Okay, all right, so it was still in use. But there's not a lot of business south of here. And in fact, the rails, I can't remember what street they're at, but you get a little bit south of where the Erie used to be, and the rails are kind of out of service because Genpack was down there and Genpack closed that operation, or they're doing it all by truck.
That's where it ends.
What's that?
That's where it ends right now.
Yeah.
They still get a covered hopper down there.
Yeah,
About 30 years ago, we ran a speeder trip down the M&NJ to the end of the track.
yeah.
Slayville.
Now, yeah, and I know there were rails spread even further south of there. This building was totally destroyed in a fire in 2020. It was being used by several different occupants. This is the erecting shop. Again, built like a tank, but out of service. And there was a company that was doing theatrical stage sets in there, and that's where the fire started. So it was totaled. Also being used as a small sound stage. So this is looking towards the northeast. This building had great bones. I guess at this point, it's just been basically leveled. There's nothing left on the site. Not too far away is the car body shop, and it was far enough away it didn't catch on fire. Still being used by a mechanical equipment company. It survived the fire very nicely. I don't know who's in here now, but somebody was using this building. Heading north from Middletown Yard, this is Sands Road Crossing, otherwise known as Highlights. And this is where the trains could really pick up some speed before going up over the Shawangunk Mountains. In fact, they used to call this the Fair Oaks Speedway, a little bit north of here. Middletown, New Jersey used this track, surviving piece of O&W trackage, to get to its connection with Conrail and the Grand Line. And this is where the O&W crossed the Grand Line. So back in Campbell Hall, the Grand Line crossed the O&W. Up here, the O&W crosses the Grand Line. Which the Grand Line, I think, was built in the early first decade of the 20th century. So my guess is they had to dig under the O&W to put the rails in, because the grade was already established for the O&W at that point. And here's Ross looking at the footings. Now, this was a two-track bridge, but it was still in service until the late 70s by Conrail, because there were a couple of customers up in Fair Oaks, and also the Crawford Railroad, which ran to Pine Bush, New York, an Erie branch, used the O&W to access Pine Bush from Middletown. And it's something I never really paid any attention to, but you know, we were maybe 20, not even 20 years after Conrail pulled the rails out. So this is what the connection looks like today. Those are the footings you just saw going up to Fair Oaks. And this is the connection that goes to Middletown now off the Graham line. Yep. And there was no connection between the O&W and the Graham line. So any freight interchange had to be done in the yard in Middletown. They went their separate ways after that. So zipping along to the northwest, the O&W crossed Route 302 here. Again, this was a 2-track main at Crawford. This is just east of Crawford Junction. And the engineers called it the Fair Oaks Speedway because they could really lay on some speed, which is not something you could do in many places on the O&W. Maybe once you got north of Oneida, going along the lake to Oswego, it was fairly flat. But it went over some very, very mountainous territory. And there are many people that wondered why it was even built in the first place because of that. Whereas other roads went alongside rivers or chose geographically less challenging routes for their tracks. So the Erie Lackawanna used these tracks to service a lumber yard in Fair Oaks for several years after abandonment, running up to M&M Road. And I'm turning around looking the other way. And what do you see? That's where the rails were. And I don't know if they're still there, but obviously they were paved over. You can see a tiny bit of rail here. But that is the line going up to Fair Oaks. So what did that all look like back then? Well, here's a section of a topo map. This is a USGS map from 1971, I believe, and using data from that year. So here is the O&W. And you can see it running up here and stops just before M&M Road. And this was a feed dealer, possibly also a lumber yard, but you know, basically one of these big agway type operations that was still getting rail shipments. And here's the Crawford Branch going up to Pine Bush. So this is original O&W, this is original Erie, and these tracks were still in use. Now, the interesting thing about this is crossing a 4-lane highway, divided highway, Route 17. Yeah, it was crazy. And I, more than once, we'd be coming down 17 and they would have to flag you. It was a flag stop. They had a crossbuck there, no gates, obviously, but they would have to flag the cars to a stop, which is insane for a 4-lane divided highway. So Conrail kept service going to Pine Bush, kept service going up here to the yard. They had a little stub track here, I guess, to give themselves rooms to move the cars around. And then they scrapped all of it. So sometime, nobody really knows for sure, but sometime in the late 70s, all of this track was removed, going all the way back to highlights. So a little bit further past M&M Yard, we're driving very slowly. And again, this is detective work. We're looking to see where the right-of-way might have been. And I've got a topo map out. My son is going, you know, wait, that looks like it. So get out. Well, it turns out this is the O&W right-of-way. Okay, we're single track here. This is Winterton, New York. So we're getting ready to do a big curve and go up the hill to cross through the Shawangunk Mountains. The right-of-ways are in pretty good shape. When people have maintained these as private roads, they're nice, they're in wonderful condition. Now we turn around 180 degrees and here's the right-of-way going this way and curling up the hill. So at the time, I don't know who was living here, but there's a signal in his front yard and a bunch of other railroad memorabilia. So at this point, the road is curving slowly, going up a very steep incline to Shawangunk Tunnel, which is one of the higher spots on the line in Highview Station. So this is the end of highballing it. And now maybe you need a pusher engine at this point to get up the hill. So here are the tracks. Here's Highview Station. And here is the tunnel, Shawangunk Tunnel, Highview Tunnel, whatever you want to call it. And then Mamading Station coming out the other side. And just down the hill is the branch to Port Jervis. Here's Wurtsboro. Now, I wanted to show you this because this is the Newburgh-Cohecton Turnpike, and it had a nasty fiddler's elbow here. And my stepmother and one of my aunts told me that back in the 30s, they knew somebody was riding a bicycle on the road here, and they came around and a truck was going the other way and just flattened it. And the O&W bridge was very low at this point, so there was not a lot of clearance for high trucks. It was just a very dangerous area to be in. This is Highview Station. We're looking at it from the south as if we're approaching. The tracks would be right here. This is one of two stations on the line. I don't think there was more than two that used this Spanish Revival terracotta roof. Why they did this, nobody knows. It looks beautiful. Over the years, this has been a residence. It was a chicken coop at one time. It was a residence again. I don't know who's there now. I believe it is also a residence. You guys ran a trip up there not too long ago.
Yeah, it's private residence.
Yeah.
They've kind of expanded the station, but it's a private residence.
Yeah. So you can see it from the nearby road, but I don't know that they appreciate your walking in. But we did anyway. There was nobody there. So here's what the other side looks like. Again, the tracks are going this way. So this is a view from the north side of the station. And obviously in beautiful shape. And here's an original O&W lamp, street lamp, because this is where the cars would pull in. The tunnel is off to the right. There didn't appear anybody living here or using the building. My stepmother had remembered getting off at this station. Her family briefly had a summer home up a little ways up the hill in Highview. And they would go to the Shawanga Lodge, which is one of the famous resorts, but no longer there. And she also told me that when they were going through the tunnel, everybody would get up very quickly and close the windows because of all that smoke would come back in. So where's the tunnel? There it is. This is a very interesting tunnel. And notice this over here, that's all shale. A good deal of this mountain range, this is information from my brother, is shale. And shale is very soft rock. It's often used to do road repairs. And there's other rock in here, but a lot of it is shale, and shale is unstable, and shale, if you don't put a tunnel liner in over time, shale's just going to start crumbling and falling in. So this tunnel has a real problem with water ingress. Here, it's probably up to your ankles, but there are places in there where it's up to your waist. And I know people that have kayaked through it. And I mean, they had to lift the boats and get around fallen rock. I would not go in there. The other thing about this tunnel, again, this is signature shale, layers and layers and layers. It's sedimentary rock. And often you'll find shale where coal is, but there's very little coal here. It's just shale. And that's not the light at the end of the tunnel, it's just a reflection that I caught off the lens. The north end of the tunnel was blocked off to keep people going through it. Problem with that is that it kept the water inside. Water couldn't drain out. So some of you know that we're at the other side of the tunnel now. We're heading towards Mamading. This is all water flow. So this is what's left of the right of way, but it's mostly sand. New York 17 is going to become Interstate 86. So highway engineers are concerned about this tunnel and how stable it is. So they were the ones that had the blockage removed from north end of the tunnel so the water could drain out, because the highway runs right over the top of the tunnel. And if that tunnel caves in, that's going to be a major disaster. So I don't know what their plan is to stabilize it. They may even have to put a liner in there. I really don't know. And it would take a ton of earth and rock to fill it in all the way. It's not a short tunnel. And there's the footing. Now you can see the footing for the bridge. So the bridge is right there, just over the top of that van. So cars would come flying around this corner and trucks would come flying around this corner, and boom, happened on a regular basis. I was told a story that a truck carrying acid hit a car coming around here. It spilled acid all over the place, killed the driver. So very, very dangerous. The township here was quite happy when the O&W removed the tracks and removed this bridge, because trucks were limited to a certain height going over it. This is Mamading Station. This is in beautiful shape. This has been a Veterans of Foreign Wars post since not long after the railroad was abandoned. They took over the building, and they do maintain it. They maintain the grounds outside of it. So this is looking from the tunnels behind me. It's down the hill towards Summitville. They mow the grass here. They take really good care of it. And you can follow the right of way all the way down the hill right to Summitville Station, and people do go down there with ATVs. And the O&W has had events where they've opened the station up and we're able to go in and see the inside of it. Little side trip here. This is Wurtsboro Station. This is in 1997. I don't know what it looks like today.
It still looks pretty decent. The coal tower is just about falling down.
Yeah, there was a big coaling tower over here. which has been steadily falling down over the years. And as Al said, it's probably gone now. But the Port Jervis Monticello branch ran right here. So it's being used as a residence where you're there and been freshly painted in 1997. I don't know if it looks like this now, but somebody was taking care of it. And this was a very busy railroad yard at one time, Summitville, and there's nothing left of it. It's just a field with trees in it. Behind me is 209, the expressway, that chopped up a part of it and also took out the bridge abutments for where the O&W crossed the old 209. But this is where the main line, the Kingston Branch and Port Jervis all came together. So we're looking eastbound at the Shawangunk Mountains. Now we're going to go back in time a little bit. Ron Vasallo gave me these. This is what the station looked like around 1980. The local fire department finally burned it. It was a controlled burn as part of an exercise. They burned it to the ground. So we're looking north towards Ellenville. So the main line is here. Whoops. Hit the wrong button again. Get back up. Sorry about that. Main line is here. Behind the station is where the Kingston branch is, and the Port Jervis branch came in over this way. So this is another view in the wintertime. I'm standing on what was the Y going to Kingston up this way. And that's the main line going up towards Red Hill. Many years ago, there were a couple of narrow gauge cars sitting here, which I guess they eventually just disintegrated. Somebody had a plan to put a tourist railroad in here. And like this part of the world, most of those plans just go off to die. Nothing ever happens. Nothing ever comes of it. All right, so let's head west towards Phillipsport. We're on the main, on Red Hill Road. You'll find plenty of these. These are going to be around a long time. Poured concrete overpasses. And this one was built in 1904. The tracks are running here, starting to get the grade to go up to Mountaindale from Summitville. Again, you need pusher engines here. It's pretty steep. You can easily find this going on Red Hill Road, and you'll see the right-of-way. If you go up in the fall or in the spring when there's not a lot of leaves on the trees, you can see the right-of-way paralleling the road all the way up the hill. And so we went up on top of it just for the heck of it. So up here, that was where the last set of tracks were. Of course, since the ties are still there, it's full of trees now. But where everybody ran the ATVs, there's no trees, there's no bushes. Kind of ironic when you think about it. But yeah, you can pretty much ATV all the way up to Little Falls. I think it's Little Falls. There's a private property there, and there's a little trestle. Well, there's the footings for a trestle over a little waterfall, just south of Mountaindale. Now we're in Mountaindale, and the tracks ran right here. Post office is sitting right on top of the tracks. It was built there in the early 60s. It's a sleepy little village. There's really nothing going on there now. A couple of people own pretty much the whole town. But one of my observations when we were visiting these places is that even if the town is practically dead, you'll always find A, a nail salon, and B, a pizza parlor.
And that's Chinese restaurant.
Yes, exactly. Chinese restaurant, nail salon, pizza parlor. And we found that in several places. This is a sleepy little village. We visited lots of vacant stores. The original station burned here. They built another station. I believe that one either burned or was knocked down eventually. They seem to have a lot of trouble keeping these stations in one piece. So we're moving west along the right-of-way. We're approaching Woodridge, New York, which is originally Centerville. There really was nothing there. The O&W basically created the village out of a few houses and maybe a farm when they put the tracks through. So there's a tennis court here, but that's the right-of-way. And it's coming in on what's now Green Street in Woodridge. So lots of the right-of-way saw a second life as paved and gravel roads in many towns. Now, some people think that the main county road going through is the right-of-way. It's not. It's one block over. This is a grain elevator. I don't think that structure is there anymore either.
Oh, it's there.
Oh, is it still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it still being used?
Yeah, I mean, it's not vacant.
Yeah. Okay. So somebody's using it. Yeah. Yeah. So Woodridge is originally named Centerville. It's another sleepy little town on the tracks. And here's a little commemorative sign, Woodridge, New York, saying that Centerville Station opened in the O&W in 1911. The name of the village was changed to Woodridge in 1917. I have no idea why they changed it. It was just arbitrarily changed. And that's the village offices. So the right-of-way's just behind us along with where the station used to be. So at this point, we're up that pretty steep Red Hill grade, and now we're heading towards the Neversink River. The main road veers off to the south, and this is the right of way. And people are using this to saw up wood, store trash, dump stuff. I don't even know what this was. We drove back here. It's very easy to get to. It'll take you right up to the east abutment of the Never Sink Bridge. So we are right here, and the railroad makes a sharp turn, and we're on this sandy section. And right here is where it jumps across the Never Sink River. So the bridge abutments are still there. Bridge is long gone, of course. And then it makes a sharp turn to the right, and it goes through a tunnel, the second tunnel, Fallsburg Tunnel, to South Fallsburg. And here we are on the east abutment. So the tracks ran across here. The tunnel is just a little ways to the west. And there it is. Now, I don't know if you've ever gone down to it. This is not easy to get to. There's a road called Tunnel Hill Road, but you kind of have to know where you're going, and there's really no place to park on Tunnel Hill Road. Fortunately, there's not a lot of traffic on it. And we did find one spot where we could get the Volvo off just far enough so we weren't blocking traffic. But it's a very steep incline down to the tunnel. If I go back to that topo map, you can see that the contours here are 1,300 feet, and I'm going down to at least 100 feet to get down to the tunnel entrance. And I mean, it's a pretty steep drop. Fortunately, we brought hiking boots. This is actually of the 4 tunnels that were on the line south of Cadosia. One, of course, is gone completely, Hawk Mountain. It was demolished when they built the Quickway. Shawangunk, you don't want to go into. We don't know what's going to happen with that. But Fallsburg Tunnel and the tunnel north of Walton are actually in decent shape. They're pretty dry. Water, you're going to find water in all these tunnels. It's just the way it is. But the liner in here goes quite a ways in. And this is beautiful stonework. It's high enough to clear a bull moose. That was their tallest locomotive, the 210-2s. Now, that is a light at the end of the tunnel, unlike Shawangunk. I said to my son, hey, you want to walk through? We got wading boots on. And he got about 10 feet in. He goes, no, I don't want to walk through. It's kind of creepy in there, but you can walk through it, and you'll come out right by the South Fallsburg Police Station and Municipal Building. So there he is. He's debating, should I go through? Should I go through? No, I don't want to go through. Should I go through? No, I don't want to go through. But yeah, the stonework and the liner is in pretty good shape in here. So as long as this water can drain, it'll be in fine shape. It'll be here for a long time. Now, that's way down there. So you come up this way. This is the right of way, and we're in South Fallsburg. There's the ubiquitous post office. And there is the township building, the police station. So that is the South Fallsburg station. This was a very important station for the railroad because it's smack in the middle of the Borscht Belt. This station and Ferndale, Liberty, Rosco, Livingston Manor, that's how you accessed all the wonderful resort hotels back in the 30s, 40s, and the early 50s. Of course, by then they weren't really running passenger service except during the summertime for camps. But it's nice to see that the station's still in decent shape. Now, we took a side trip down to Monticello. When the O&W, actually when the New York Oswego Midland was built, they bypassed Monticello, which is the county seat. And of course, back then, post-Civil War, it was a badge of honor. It was, you were better than other towns if you had railroad service. So they built another line called the Monticello and Port Jervis, which was reorganized as the Port Jervis and Monticello, which the O&W acquired in 1903 as a branch line. But this was the station, and it's intact. And if you go a little bit behind me, I think the turntable pit is, the remnants are still there. I don't know if it's been filled in, but there was a small turntable. And a company called Van Etten Oil now owns this. And it's now, I think, VO Energy or something. And it's where we got our propane for our house down in Forestburg. We got our oil and our propane from these guys. And they told me when they took this building over, because it was a nice big yard where they could, park their trucks, put their tanks in, they went up in the attic and they found tons and tons of O&W stuff. They found schedules, they found tickets, they found all kinds, I don't know where it all went, but they found a lot of it. But they do keep the station in nice shape. That's the original platform. That's where people would board. And the society, and I just found these pictures, the society went, I want to say about 20 years ago, and put a historic plaque outside explaining that this was the station for the Middletown Port Jervis, Middletown, and O&W. And so it's nice that they're keeping it up. It's really not a lot to look at, but it's in decent shape. Now, we're going to take a little bit of a jump. We skipped Hurley, or Luzon, as the railroad called it. I'm going to go right to Ferndale. This is just west of the Quickway. And this station is just east of the massive Ferndale Trestle, one of the taller trestles on the line over the Monticello River. When the Quickway was built, it severed the right-of-way. The station site, not unusual to see this. Quite often I tell people, if you want to know where a railroad went, you're going through a town, you see an agway or you see propane tanks, chances are there was a track there at one time. So this is an industrial fuel dealer, oil, propane, and other products. It's County Petroleum Products in 2023. So the tracks ran on this side, I believe, and they curved to the north to cross the Trestle. So to give you an idea where we are, this is a map again from 1943. So here is the old 17. Here is the O&W. And this is the little village of Ferndale. And right up here is where it jumps over the Monticello to go into Liberty. Now, much of the right-of-way, once you get to Liberty, survives, and it's a hiking trail. But the station burned down in the 80s. It was also a nightclub, I believe, at the end. So we're in Liberty now. This is the Liberty Freight House. New York State Electric and Gas, or whatever they're called nowadays, maintains it. They maintain it in beautiful shape. The roof was in great shape. It's just for storage. And the O&W, right from the west end of Ferndale Trestle, almost all the way to the high school, is a hiking trail. It's called the Liberty Rail Trail. It didn't exist when we were there, but this is the two-track main, and this is where the station was, where this agway is. And this is looking the other way. That's an original stone wall built by the O&W. And again, this is the station site, and there's a fuel and oil and lumber and garden dealer in here, or at least there was back in 1997. The trail resumes and terminates at Chestnut Street, but my understanding now is it goes all the way to the high school. High school was rebuilt a number of years ago. They expanded it, they put a new high school in, and the trail goes right up to it. And that would be a little ways in the distance here. So at this point, it was fenced off. This was as far as we could go, west of Chestnut Street, New York 55. So this is up above the village of Liberty. Liberty is closer down to the bottom of the hill. And Grossinger's, the famous Grossinger's Resort, is the other side of 17 on the opposite hill. So you had to go up the hill quite a ways to get to where the station was. Now we're a little bit west of Liberty, and we're heading towards Young's Gap, which was 1,200 feet above sea level. This was absolutely pusher engine territory. And this is the right-of-way going through the woods towards Parksville. What did it look like years ago? Well, I found this postcard. A guy in the livingstonmanor.net website. You can see the printing texture, but there's the O&W. And this is one of the first sections of the Quickway. They call it the Liberty Bypass. It was built not long after the railroad went out of business. So around 1959, 1960 is when this highway was constructed, but they hadn't scrapped the tracks yet. So they're coming from here, curling around, and they're going this way out of the frame. This is Parksville. You really can't get anything under here. This is, I guess, for a horse-drawn cart at one time. But this is where the tracks crossed through Parksville and a little creek here. And I mean, it's really low. If I stand there just above my head, so that's 6 feet of clearance. Over a short creek by Short Road, but Short Road is now a ramp up to the highway. A number of years ago, the state came through because 17 had several traffic lights here, and you can't have traffic lights on an interstate. So what they did was they rerouted 17 up along the top of the ridge. And when they did so, they obliterated the right-of-way just west of Parksville. It just tore it down. You could see it for a long time. You could see a little hill where the tracks ran. That's all gone. It was just blown up with dynamite, excavated, and they built the new 86, I-86 through there to get past traffic lights, and 17 is now the old 17. This is Livingston Manor. The station's been gone a very long time. It was a big station. It was I think it was actually a division point because they kept a lot of pusher engines here to go back up over Young's Gap. But it was one of the first sections that was scrapped after the railroad went out of business. The freight station somehow survived untouched. Somebody owns it. Somebody is maintaining it. It doesn't look this great here, but it has a new roof on it. So I don't know who was using it at the time. Dubois Road runs along the old right-of-way east of Main Street. This was once a really busy place. I've seen photographs of Livingston Manor back in the 40s where you can't park. There's no place to park downtown in the late 40s. And the trains are running there and the crossing gates are down. And now you go through there and it's just a sleepy little bird. Nothing happening. There's another view of it from the other side, looking westbound. So again, the roof's in good shape, mostly good shape. I believe last time I was up there, it's hard to see it. It's behind the telephone company's central office. But it looked like somebody had also done some work on the outside of the building. Before you get here is Morriston. Morriston is a tiny little enclave of houses along the Little Beaverkill River. And he remembers, he's in his early 80s, he remembers standing on his porch, the farmhouse, and waving to the diesels as they went back and forth right across the other side of the street on Old Liberty Road. So here's where things get really interesting with the road because it crisscrossed the Willowemoc 5 times between Livingston Manor and Rosco. You know, they're constantly looking for the lowest grade. So there's across and across and across and across and across and across and across before they get to Rosco. So you can find some of the stone pillars and abutments. You can see them from Old 17 in the Quickway. And if you get out of your car, walk a little bit, you can actually come up to them. Halfway between was a little village called Hazel. Hazel is gone now. Where Hazel was, is now for the southbound traffic, it's like a rest area, big parking area. You can get out, use the bathroom. You can, view the beautiful Willowemoc Creek. And if you're clever and you walk back a little ways, you will find this. That's an abutment for one of the many crossings, a stone bridge support. Now, what's interesting about this is concrete. But when I went up and looked at it a little bit more carefully, saw that. So what the O&W did is they put poured concrete over the original stone abutment. They didn't build a new abutment. I guess they felt that it was in good enough shape that all they had to do was put a protective liner on it. Well, all these years later, this liner is crumbling, peeling, falling apart, and those stones are still there. So now we're in Rosco, which originally was called Westfield Flats. Its name was changed. The Quickway at this point is running right on top of where the old tracks were through Rosco. This is where the O&W Museum is. It's not open very often. There is one person taking care of it. Back in the day, there were several people maintaining it, but they passed away, so it's hanging on. The station, signal, and weather vane, though, they survived scrapping, so they're still there. And this is one of the many eerie cabooses that are all over. There's one down in Livingston Manor, there's one up in Acord, and they're steel cabooses, and they're painted O&W, which they never were. The O&W only had wooden hacks. But there's a little shanty here, and what's left of a crossing signal, and another signal here. It's for the average person, it's fun to look at it. There's a passenger car that's made up. The O&W had a trout car. They actually had a custom car made that they would bring trout up and release it into the Beaverkill because Rosco is known for trout fishing. It's one of the trout fishing meccas. That trout car is in Wisconsin. The coach that's there now that is identified as a trout car is just a converted coach. And there's one of the signals. Again, some of this equipment is not original O&W, but it's just nice to have it all in one place. And that's where the Quickway is, and the Quickway was elevated. Obviously the right-of-way was a lot lower. You can easily imagine somebody trout fishing here and watching a mountain go by, or watching an FT or an F3 cruising by on that ledge. That'd be quite a picture to have. I've never seen one like it, but I would love to find it. Going north from Rosco towards Cook Falls, this is a surviving bridge, the O&W. It's a through truss bridge. It's actually Bridge 153 at milepost 139. And it's a private driveway now to a place called Landfield Hollow. You can't even get this close to it now. We just, again, we were just, what's the old saying? You know, just, if you get caught, just apologize. That's what we did. We just walked right up and took pictures, figure somebody say, hey, get out of here. Oh, sorry. Nobody threatened to shoot us. But single track bridge across the Beaver Kill, and it's in great condition. You can see that they replaced the decking on it. And of course, it hasn't been painted in a long time. I don't think they'll ever paint it. But this goes back to the late 1800s. According to some of the books, Loveliner's book and a few other books, they called it Hairpole Bridge because the engineers said there were a couple of women that lived in a house right near the bridge and they seemed to be fighting and yelling at each other all the time. So that's where they came up with the name Hairpole Bridge. And by the way, if you go on Google Earth and look for that bridge, you will see on the east side of the bridge this massive field with this mansion in it. So somebody's got a really nice driveway. I'd love to have it. Cooks Falls. This is the original station. It survives nicely. It's somebody's home. Appears to be a summer residence. It was all closed up when we were there. And that's the right of way going right in front of it. It's now a local road. So in this part of South Sullivan and Delaware County, they just said, hey, you know what? We need roads here. We'll just take the right of way and just pave it over. They did all the hard work. We'll just use it. And here's a retaining wall. This is just south or east of the Cooks Falls station. It's built after one of the many floods eroded the fill. This area, the Delaware River, this is the east branch of the Delaware River, floods a lot. And when it does, it creates a lot of problems with soil erosion, and it's also taken out a few bridges. We're also in dam country up here, so we're very close to some of the New York City water supply dams. This is O&W Road. This is the right of way. Just outside of Cook Falls, heading towards East Branch. This is an original stone retaining wall. All they did was just make a macadam road out of it. This was called back then. And there's plenty of room for two tracks here. We're on our way to Fish's Eddy and ultimately Kadosia. So we're looking eastbound here towards East Branch. And now we're in East Branch, and this is just a highway bridge, but this pylon, or not pylon, but this abutment, is for a railroad called the Delaware and Northern, which started up around 1904, that went from East Branch up to Arkville and struggled to stay out of bankruptcy most of its existence. At the end, they were running brill cars on it. Never made a lot of money, used locomotives, cut costs wherever they could. Well, its last use was as an access railroad to build the Downsville Reservoir. The guy that bought it was the prime contractor, so he used it to bring in off the O&W line construction equipment, gravel, fill, whatever. And then, of course, they flooded a good portion of it once the dam was built. So here's where we are. This is coming from Cooks Falls. Here's East Branch. There's the DNN. This is a map again from 1943. So it's still showing it. The USGS doesn't religiously update their data. So somebody probably came out a few years later and said, hey, there used to be a railroad here. What happened to it? It's underwater now. So that's the Delaware Northern. Here's the O&W again, crisscrossing. And now at this point, it's staying pretty much on the south side of the Delaware River. And then here is Fish's Eddy. So it's going to jump across the Delaware River again. Now, this used to be the O&W Bridge. It's a repurposed O&W Bridge that is now the road into Fish's Eddy. The road that was to Fish's Eddy was on another bridge to the north of here that was taken out by a flood. So again, they said, well, this bridge seemed to be in good shape. Originally, there were two bridges here because the O&W put a second track in. One of those bridges was removed. You can see the bridge abutments are much wider than they need to be. And this is the only surviving bridge, the only way to get into Fish's Eddy. And notice there's no apostrophe or anything. So we don't know what Fish was or who he is or who they were. But there's one of the pylons from the original highway bridge that got knocked out in a flood. And so the Delaware, it can fool you. It looks pretty placid most of the time, but it can get pretty nasty when it gets a lot of rain. Now, this map is about the same time period, going out of Fish's Eddy, and here's the tracks. And here's that sharp bend in the Delaware, and the O&W decided to tunnel through here to get to Cadosia. So this is where Hawk Mountain Tunnel was. Well, Hawk Mountain Tunnel was a pretty tight fit, but you could get a bull moose through it. My understanding was, I was told, I don't know if it's true, that they couldn't run them through there. They had to put the drivers down and push them through or pull them through. But when the state decided to put the quick way in, they basically took this entire mountain and just blasted it away. There's nothing left of the mountain. So Hawk Mountain Tunnel is buried under tons and tons of rock and soil. So now we're in Kadosia. And this building at one time was a club, it was a restaurant, it was a florist shop. I don't know what it's being used for now. In 1997, it was boarded up. And the freight building is also here too. So this is a division point, very important part of the railroad. This is where the Scranton line down to Carbondale, Mayfield Yard, and ultimately to Scranton branched off to the south, crossing on a pretty steep trestle, and then jumping over another one over the Delaware River and over the Erie. You can see the freight house here. So, I mean, the building is in decent shape. Again, new roof here. This is in 1997. Somebody's taking care of it. But I don't know what it's being used for now. But this was a big yard. It was a very busy yard. Northern Division took off from here to go up through Walton and ultimately to Oneida, through Hamilton to Oneida and on the way to Oswego. This is one of the bridge abutments where the Scranton Division jumped over the Erie and jumped over the Delaware River. So these will be here forever. People probably go by and wonder, what's this big wall of concrete doing here? And that was a double track bridge that went across. And that double track bridge actually was built, the Scranton Division was 1890 or so.
Correct.
Yeah, around 1890. That was the Carbondale, I can't remember the name.
Ontario, Carbondale, and Scranton.
Ontario, Carbondale, and Scranton Railroad, yeah. Because anthracite, everybody wanted anthracite, long coal drags coming out of here. So all it remains is this enormous concrete footing, and there might be some other debris around here left over from when it was taken down. So we made it to Kadosia, then we decided to go back a year later and go Ellenville to Kingston. The reason we did that, there's really not a lot to see of the O&W south of Summitville. The only station south of Summitville that survives is Wurtsboro. And for a good part of the time, you're going south towards Port Jervis, you're going along the Bashakill, you're going through a nature preserve, and then you wind up going past a couple of offices and buildings in Port Jervis and the old high school. So we decided just to head north because there's quite a few stations going north to Kingston that do survive. And that's the first one, that's Ellenville. So this station's in decent shape. I just read last year an article in the New York Times. There is a company in here that sells used theatrical sets and costumes. So you go in there and you'll see all kinds of crazy costumes and props and things, and they're using the building for that. So the tracks ran right in front of here, continued north on an easy grade. So you're following a creek all the way up, several creeks all the way up to Kingston. This appeared to be closed up and just being used as storage. The roof was in great shape. The shake shingles are in great shape. The right of way for a long way parallels the Delaware and Hudson Canal and Sandberg Creek going through town. And here's a view from the south end of it. So this is an addition that was put on, I don't know, just some sort of all-weather, all-purpose space that was being used. This was also a very busy yard and station, so there were some Catskill resorts near here that people would get off the train and they would meet a coach, horse-drawn coach, would take them to their resort. Napanoch, the O&W Society, and I just found the photos from 2007. The O&W Society had a dedication to this. This is right on the grounds of the New York State Correctional Facility, which back then on the topo maps is the Napanoch Institution for Mental Delinquents. Can't say that stuff nowadays. But Napanoch Station was rebuilt by some of the inmates. They did all the work on it. The O&W came up and they had a dedication of it. It's in beautiful shape on the inside and outside. Now, one interesting thing about this property is you're not supposed to take any pictures around here. I noticed that sign after I took the pictures. Nobody came out and said anything to me, but somebody posted on the Facebook page on O&W that they went up there and a couple of guards came up and said, you can't take pictures up here. And then when they said they're with the society, one of the guards said, okay, it's just as long as it's just the station, but they don't want you taking pictures of the prison, which is that big thing back there. That's a maximum security prison, by the way. But I couldn't help it. You know, it's in the back of the picture. So yes, there is the facility for mental delinquents. There's Sandberg Creek and the D&H Canal. So the station looks a little weather beaten here, but trust me, it's in beautiful shape. They really are taking very nice care of it. Going a little bit further northeast, eastbound is Warwarsting Station. This was closed. I don't know what it's being used for, but it's also in good shape. Again, a new roof, and this is stucco with wood inlays. So the O&W seemed to experiment a lot with the stations. They did some in stone, they did some Spanish revival style, they did stucco, they did just standard board and batten stations. So this is the view from the street side. And this is the view from the track side. And I can tell you, this is all poison ivy in here. So this was a combination, had a little freight house adjoining the passenger waiting room. And there was a platform here at one time, but it's long gone. And the creek is just to our right, Rondout Creek. And this is looking the other way, looking towards the south. So again, it's in decent shape. Whoever owns these stations, somebody's taking care of them. Now, remember before I said you can go into a small town and it can be dead, but you'll find a Chinese restaurant, pizza, and a nail salon. So this is Kerhonkson. This is where the tracks ran. And there is a nail salon, pizza parlor, and a Chinese restaurant. They're all here. We didn't see a single person. We got out, walked around, we looked in the windows, pizza place was open, nobody was in there. Like a Twilight Zone episode. So the tracks ran right here. And up here is where the O&W trail starts. The goal is to bring that all the way south down to Ellenville. So they're going to connect Ellenville with Kingston. So it's happening in stages. And again, my late brother was one of the instrumental people, one of the instrumental persons in getting that thing done. So here's the tracks going into the woods, but that's the right of way. So you can walk on it. And there's at least one spot where there's one girder that crosses the little stream. So, you know, there's not much there, but it's worth taking a hike on it. Next station up is Accord. And I pronounce it Accord because I heard several people say that, but I've been told it's Accord. So
Yes.
I guess we all have to be in accord.
It's
Accord, okay.
Do you know the story behind the name?
No,
It used to be, it was on the D&H Canal, and it was, Port Murray or Port something like.
Port something, yes, on the D&H
And,
Canal.
People wanted, when the canal went away, people wanted to rename it, and they couldn't decide on a name. And so they were saying Discord, and they said, well, no one wanted to call it Discord.
Yeah.
So they called that Accord.
Accord, okay.
It's also the inspiration for the Honda Accord. Oh,
Isn't that interesting?
When I was there in the seventies.
Yeah.
There was still an old sign on the side that listed the numbers for all the various resorts.
Yeah.
That still survived in the
Yeah,
seventies.
yeah, this is the northern edge of the resort area. We're almost out of it at this point. Neville was a very important one down towards Ellenville, but as we get further north, we're moving out of that and more into farm country. But anyway, the station was being used as a deli. We were there. And we were there on a weekday at lunchtime and they were closed. So I don't know what the heck was going on with that. But somebody thought appropriate to put a little bit of track in the front yard and stick another one of those dummied up Erie coaches, Erie hacks as an O&W hack. You can't get into it, but you can look into it. So I think it's still there. Haven't been through Accord in a long time. My wife has a trailer in a trailer park. It's been sitting up there for years. It probably fell apart. She gave it to a friend of hers. I don't know what happened to it. So we have no reason to go back, but just the other side of where the tracks ran, and these tracks are not where the right of way was. They were closer to the station, but just the other side is this thing. So again, if you see a building like this and you see a grassy strip running next to it, chances are there's probably a railroad there at one time. So this is a paint dealer, feed dealer, lumber dealer, everything dealer, coal dealer, you name it. They were still in operation back then. There wasn't much going on. But that is the branch. We're looking back down towards Kerhonkson.
That station was recently, I would say renovated, but it's more like renovated. They took the entire front of that structure and made it a one big window. I think it's an Airbnb now that you can, the station, it's like an Airbnb if you want to stay for $400 a night or something.
Yeah, but it doesn't look like it doesn't look like.
It looks nothing like what it used to.
That's a shame when that happens, but you know, I appreciate when people renovate a station and they keep the station look. So I'm sorry to hear that. But now on the other hand, go a little bit further north, we're in High Falls. This is where the Rondout Creek goes over a very high waterfall on its way to Kingston. And this is the Highview Station, and this is in gorgeous shape. I mean, the people that bought this have really done a nice job maintaining it. That's where the tracks ran. This is where our cars would come in and drop off, pick up passengers. So we didn't get a chance to talk to the owners. Put a little trellis here. They have plants growing on it. But I believe this is now part of the O&W Trail. This was a sticking point because, again, people that had bought these structures, when somebody approaches you and says, we'd like to run a trail behind right next to your house, understandably, a lot of them say, I'm not sure I want that. Because I don't know who's, NIMBYs. But you don't know who's going to be on the track. You don't know who's going to be on the trail. And, the first thing that comes to mind is, are people going to be running ATVs and things like that up there? Doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be mostly people on bicycles and hiking, which is good. This is my favorite. This is Cadosia. So the tracks ran right there. And this is a funny looking little station, but dig that chimney. It's gold at the top, tiles on it. We're getting into artsy country here. A lot of very interesting things that people are doing with their properties. So Cadosia is in the heart of what they call a cement district. Rosendale is very close to here. Rosendale at one time was the cement capital of the United States. It was a very high quality limestone formation there, which resulted in very high quality cement. So the railroad took a lot of shipments of cement out. And later on, a lot of trucks took shipments of cement. So you can see ads for them going back to the early 1900s, 1910s, 1920s. And it was called high quality Rosendale cement. It said somewhere in the ad, it would say that. Either it was the name of the company or they said that's where they got it from.
It was too high quality. The problem with Rosendale cement is you couldn't demolish it. So if you built a structure, it was there. And that's
But take it down.
Portland cement became a lot more
Yeah.
prevalent than you could demolish it.
Yeah. That's an unusual problem to have, a cement that's so good that it'll never erode. Well, when in Philadelphia, they have a casino called the Sugar House, and they built it on the site of a former Domino sugar mill, and they couldn't demolish the mill. They tried blowing it up. They tried hitting it with wrecking balls and everything. They couldn't knock it down. It took forever to get that thing down. So it was probably built with Rosendale cement. Now, this structure is across the street from Cadosia, and I believe this is a dry cement storage bin. So you could offload cement from the Rosendale quarries and store it here, and a lot of them would then bag it. And of course, the right-of-way is going right there where the power line is. So that again is now part of the O&W Trail. Now then there's this. Okay, this is the Walkill Valley Railroad. This trestle was built in 1872. They thought they built it strong enough, so they weren't so sure. And when they tested it for the first time, they had one guy in a locomotive going very slowly across it, just in case it collapsed, and then another locomotive behind it. This was in use all the way up through Conrail. When Conrail scrapped the Walkill Valley Railway, it's now part of a rail trail, but it was sold to a private individual for $1, which supposedly was the same thing that happened to the Poughkeepsie Bridge. They just want to get it off the books. But it was sold to a local individual, and you could walk out on it to a certain point. He decked it, and it was used as the bungee jumping platform. So this is looking over a guardrail, and that's looking north towards Kingston. So this was always single track. You will find in the Walkill Valley books that have been done by the O&W Society, and there's a few other publications, you will see Conrail running over here. You will see New York Central going over here. But the bridge held up. So my understanding now is the entire thing is open. People go up there and they do wedding photos. They have parties up there. It's all part of the rail trail.
Yeah, it was totally renovated. I was up there last year.
Yeah.
The bridge is fantastic.
Yeah.
And actually the whole trail is, I rode about 24 miles
Correct.
on the Walkill Valley.
Yep.
Last
Yes, except by the prison. I don't think they opened that section yet. No. For obvious reasons. Now, a little bit further north of Cadosia is where the grade is slowly going downhill towards Kingston. And this is right off of Route 209, where you would get on it to head south. So my brother Miles was one of the people that was the movers and shakers to get this right away, get the land acquired, and put the signs up and use it as a hiking trail. So you can get on and off of it and go as far south as Ellenville, but I don't think it's all continuous yet. I think it's a couple sections that they're still working on. But here's the sign. So here's Kingston, where you pick it up right by the old station site, and you can go ultimately all the way down to Ellenville, paralleling Sandberg Creek, the Rondout, the High Falls are right here, and what's left of the D&H Canal. Now, when we pulled over to take this picture, I thought this is really weird that 209 is 2 lanes and we've got this extra right of way. So I asked and I said, was the O&W, is this where the O&W ran? Well, the answer is yes, but not all of it. What happened was New York State wanted to make 209 a 4-lane divided highway. So they took all this land and they graded it and they kept the grass on it. And you can see, when I saw this, I said, for sure, that had to be a train. Nope. The rails crossed 209 before this bridge. That was supposed to be the widened 209. So the train went through Hurley. And there's no sign of the station. The station is gone. There's a nice little general store there. I bought a beautiful HO model of a little O&W tea kettle with engineers and a tender behind it. There was a guy in the area that was building these things and painting them. And they were selling them in the general store, which is unusual to have a general store. Have a section for model trains.
There's just to the right of that bridge is Pitt Station Avenue. There's a historical marker down there.
Yep.
No sign of the station.
No. Now, we are on the old road going into Kingston. The old 209. 209 is off in the distance here. And that's a right of way coming right up and then paralleling this road right into town. So this is Hurley Avenue. Hurley's back that way. The right of way is here. It's a power line right of way. And a stone's throw away from us is the Ulster and Delaware. Now, here's the right of way going under the thruway. How's that possible? Well, there's a couple places where the thruway construction started before the O&W went bankrupt. The New York State Thruway Authority was created in the early 50s. Construction started in 1955. The O&W was still a going concern at that point. So they had to protect the O&W crossings at several places. One of them is near Orr's Mill. And if you look sharp, you can see it in the wintertime. Although I expect at some point they're going to fill it in there. And that's right near Meadowbrook, going north on the thruway. Another one was here where the O&W Kingston Branch ran in. And there's another one up near Oneida, New York, where the main line went under the thruway.
And it is filled in there by the way.
And another place where they were going to build it, and they didn't, is where the line runs to Central Square. That's Interstate 81, north of Syracuse. And what happened was they were so close to abandonment when they were in bankruptcy that they stopped building 81 and just to wait to see what would happen. And once they shut the railroad down, it's like, oh boy, you just saved us a lot of money. Well, we can just build a straight right away up there. So what's interesting about this, when we had this online, Ron Vassallo did some Photoshop work and stuck an FT in here. They never ran FTs on the Kingston Branch. All they ran was the NW2s, the smaller locomotives and the smaller steam locomotives, but they never ran FTs up here. But it would be cool to see one go through. And here is the thruway is right behind me, and I'm looking east towards Kingston. This is the original section of the O&W Rail Trail. This is actually in much better shape now. It's now, there's a path here, and I can just walk through a couple of bushes, and there's the Ulster and Delaware. And of course, that's in a lot better shape too, because they're running excursion trains on a regular basis, Catskill Mountain Railway. So this is the end of the line in Kingston. You would have no clue that there was a station here. This is Washington Avenue, and the tracks would have been right here, just in front of this sign. So the O&W interchanged with the Ulster and Delaware and the New York State Central across the street. There's a very famous photo after bankruptcy. A whole line of NW2 road switchers were delivered to the Central here, just parked where the station used to be, waiting for pickup. And that's all that's left of the O&W station, is these concrete pads. Okay, the station was right here, gone. You know, and it's funny, in some places, it's like it never left. In some places, you have to get a magnifying glass out to find it. The interchange between the O&W and the New York Central was just east of Washington Street. And the Ulster and Delaware tracks are right there. I mean, you could almost do this and touch the two trains. That's how close they were. And here is a map that'll show you how close they ran. So that is the O&W coming in, Kingston Branch. There's the Ulster and Delaware. It's almost like it's a two-track main at that point. And there's the yard, just the other side of Washington Street. And that's the Ulster and Delaware running to the West Shore, and there's the line going down to the Walkill Valley. There's many locations where the O&W interchanged. I was having a conversation with Mike Noble, the Northern Division, because I'd forgotten about the Syracuse and Shenango. Now I've learned about it, but there were multiple places: Utica, Rome, New Hartford, Oneida, Fulton, Earlville, right here in Kingston, where the interchange of the O&W, the New York Central. So that was the end of our explorations. So it's 67 years now. Shut down March 29th, 1957. Aside from short pieces of track in Middletown, Utica, stretch from Fulton to Oswego, only a few stations, some bridges here and there, 3 tunnels, and a couple of concrete abutments. You'll find them everywhere. That's all that remains. A lot of the right-of-way that we explored back then is now overgrown, and you can't even find it. The realignment of New York 17 IA6 wiped out more of the right-of-way in Parksville. Buildings have been torn down, burned down, relocated, some have been restored and maintained. But my question is, what's going to be left of the O&W 25 years from now? How much are we going to be able to find? And I suspect, aside from the buildings that people are taking loving care of or converting into gross Airbnbs, you're going to see more and more of it disappear, which is really a shame. But you know what? It was a fun trip. My son still remembers. And to this day, we could be driving somewhere and he can look through the woods and say that was right away. He's got a trained eye now. So that concludes my presentation. I want to thank you all for coming out. If you have any questions, I can take a couple of them. I don't know what we're doing on time. And a funny story. I had next to my shed, I lived down in Doylestown in Bucks County. I had next to my shed an old stand with firewood. We hadn't burned firewood in years, and there was hornets in there and other stuff. And I paid a junk company to come in 2 days ago and get rid of all that. And they found a tie plate. He said, "You want us to get rid of this?" I went, no, keep that. I know where that's from. We picked that up in Kadosia. We found it lying where the yard was, the tie plate. So anyway.
The picture and things that is interface of time capsule in its own right. Grand Union and names are both long gone.
Yeah, funny about that. Yes.
The station in Burnside burned a long time ago. The people that actually own that house, they love the design of the station so much, they designed their house to look like
Okay.
the station.
All right. I wasn't sure about that.
Yes, and that is not the Burnside station.
What's interesting about that is if you go slightly east of that, what's the utility company that's right there? Is that Central Hudson? Orange Rockland, Central Hudson. The O&W went through a really steep cut. A few years ago, Ray Kelly from the O&W Historical Society got permission for us to go back in that cut. So when you go down there, you see the ties. You can see like double track ties there. There's an old rickety wooden bridge that was a farm property that they cut through so the farmer could get his cattle from one side to the other. That bridge is still there. That farm is long gone. I have no idea how that bridge is surviving. It looks like it's starting to collapse. It's like if you kicked it the whole. Yeah.
It's still there, best of my knowledge.
Yeah. So I mean, and just south of there, going back eastbound, there's a long grade, which is somebody's private driveway that goes back about a half a mile to a house over another overpass.
Yeah, that's a beautiful concrete structure, Bridge 33. If you ever talk
Bridge
about
33. Yep. So it's there. I mean, you can find this stuff. It's just that it's funny where it pops up.
The Walkill Valley / New York Central never actually had rights into Maybrook property, but they did interchange with the O&W there in Campbell Hall. So if you want to add that to your list,
well, so but I actually have seen photos of New York Central engines in Maybrook. Yeah. I how they got in there. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
One other thing you might want to look at in Kingston is if you go to downtown Kingston, there's Kingston Point Park. It's being
right. That's where the Ulster and Delaware went all the way down to Kingston Point.
Ulster and Delaware. Yeah.
And there's a trolley museum down there.
Yeah. So
well, I've been down there. Yes. Yeah.
So the Fallsburg Tunnel, we hosted a hike for a station whistle stop tour to commemorate the end of the O&W a couple of weeks ago, the end of March. At least the north portal is rather easy to get to, because they just built a dog park.
Yeah.
Right there in like a flat area, so you're able to walk in from the dog park. but
Yeah.
It is a river through there. I mean, it is.
Picked up a lot.
It can be, I mean, 3 or 4 feet.
A lot worse
And-
than that,
What was that?
a lot worse than that.
Oh, like 3 or 4 feet of water.
Wonder where that's all
Stream
coming
now-
from.
The stream now runs through the tunnel.
Yeah.
And, part of the lining is coming down.
Oh, that's too bad.
So you could probably, I wouldn't want to walk through there, but part of the lining is coming.
See, insurance companies call those things attractive nuisances.
Right. And they want to make it a trail, but it's like, for example, between Mountaindale and the Neverson Trestle, that is now a trail. But, you know, of course, the Trestle's gone, so we couldn't continue with, it's sort of segmented in different places.
Well, they would have to, you know, if they were gonna run a trail through there, they have to put a liner in that tunnel because eventually that tunnel is gonna cave in.
Yeah.
It becomes a nightmare.
But the
Yes.
stonework is beautiful. Stonework doesn't go away.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, at the ends, it's beautiful. It's
In
much better.
Mountaindale, they actually built a new station. They built a community visitor center, but in the style of the station that the O&W never actually built.
The Northfield Tunnel, which is north of Walton, and that tunnel, the rock that's in there is a different kind of rock than the Shawangunk. It's not sedimentary rock. It's sturdier rock. Again, my brother's gone 6 years. He would tell me what it is. He's Mr. Know-it-all geologist, but those tunnels are actually in decent shape. So if they drain the water out of them and they put a liner in, they would last forever. But Shawangunk, I mean, if I was a New York State highway engineer and I'm worried about that, I'd say I'd be really worried about it, because that one of these days that tunnel's just gonna go, it's gonna collapse. I don't know how they're gonna prop it up. Because it's, yeah, and not even deep in the tunnel, it's a little bit sturdier, but towards the edges, it's all that shale and sedimentary rock, and that stuff is just, you hit that with a hammer and it breaks. It's very soft. There's another hand up here. Yes, in the back.
That was an interesting presentation. I covered a lot of the same territory in the '70s, but not as intensively as you did with maps and everything else. I had a lot of common sense, I guess. I walked through the Highview Tunnel, actually a few times. And when you start out in Highview Tunnel, you start off on a curve.
Right.
You can't really see very much. And then you get to a point around the curve, and I think you can see the far end from that point.
Yeah.
And in the tunnel itself, I guess there were several areas where they had a lot of cave-ins, and they had these brick linings.
Yeah,
Um,
that's exactly, yeah, because it's very unstable rock.
right.
And they probably, again, with age comes wisdom. I would never walk through a tunnel at this point. And when maybe I was younger and stupid, I'd try it. But I would assume there's a few dead men in there also, right? Little pockets where, you know, if you happen to be working in the tunnel and a train came through, you could. I was trying to explain that to somebody. That's one term. I know there's other ones used for it, but we should just call them dead men. There's like, you know, you go back about 2 feet or so and watch the train go right in front of you. Yes,
And I also took a few shots at Napanoch, and very quickly, a voice came out of nowhere saying, "Scram."
yeah, nobody said anything to me. I was just walking around there. In fact, just the other side of that, it's Sandberg Creek. There was a bunch of people fishing right off the highway bridge. And there's a road bridge there over Sandberg Creek, people fishing there. So I figured, well, you know, there must be a guard walking around. Nobody ever said a word to us. I shot 4 or 5 photos there. In fact, I have in my collection a beautiful shot of the prison with a deep blue sky behind it, but I'm never going to publish that. That'll bring them down hard on me, I'm sure. In the front here.
City of Middletown just bought the old station,
Yes,
all right? And they wanna fix it up. Also, the New Jersey and Middletown station on West Main Street, City of Middletown also bought that.
yes, they bought that as well. Yep.
And the train masters, building in the yard.
Mhm.
There is offices in there that's still being used. And the old paint shop has a, roofing supply.
Mhm.
And at the other end is a, fabric company.
What's the railroad that's servicing the Montgomery branch now?
Middletown in New Jersey.
Is it M&J?
M&J handles all the switching pretty much in.
Okay.
Orange
Because
County.
weren't they bought out by a larger
Yeah,
road?
they're owned by East Tech / Regional Rail.
Okay,
I live outside, I'm a mile from the old yard.
Yeah.
I go past all that every day.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's a shame about what happened to the buildings with the fire. I don't know what's gonna happen with that property.
oh, I could tell you, you cut all the steel out.
Yeah.
You got the concrete base and you just got stubbles of steel sticking up.
But the lumber yard's still in service next to it, right?
Yes, the
Yeah.
lumber yard is still there.
All right, any other
And they-
questions?
And they get deliveries.
Any other questions or comments or observations?
what's really interesting about the Ellenville branch, that was a stub-ended branch at Ellenville up until the D&H closed in 1888, 1898, 1899. The O&W actually bought portions of that right of way and extended the branch all the way to Kingston, I would say 04, 05.
What I would like to know is that there was a business just north of Ellenville for a long time, Channel Master, that made TV antennas. And the guy that started it right after World War II as TV was coming in, like in the late 40s. And I wondered if the O&W ever serviced that plant, because at one point that was a huge plant right on the tracks. But I've never been able to find any evidence that they serviced that facility.
It was pretty late in the game, but I mean, we look at that feed mill in Woodridge. That feed mill was built like 3 years before the O&W closed down.
Yeah.
So I mean, here they are building a siding, and they're in bankruptcy 17 years, and they're building, you know.
Yeah, well, you know what, remember there was two trustees running the railroad at that point, and they were trying to do anything they can to defer maintenance, bring in revenue. I mean, they were, you rarely see photos of them running on the Port Jervis branch. And there was, I think at one of the annual conventions, there was a photo of a NW2 with a crew on it, and they were coming down into Port Jervis, right by the Grand Union. Because I guess there was a couple businesses that they switched in there. In fact, I remember when we would come up from New Jersey to go to our house in Forestburg, we would shop at the Grand Union that used to be there. And I remember one time coming out, walking to the car, and there was rails in the asphalt, and that was O&W rails going down to join with the Erie. They just paved right over them.
Strange that the Erie, I think they wanted to, but they weren't allowed to take over the operation of some of the O&W's phones. They did, of course, up in Middletown, because they had tractor tracks, the Middletown Crawford. But in Port Jervis there, they couldn't take over, they couldn't.
Well, the other thing too is, remember, the railroad was bankrupt for 20 years. So you had a lot of bondholders that were really upset because they were going to lose all their money, including towns that had bonded themselves. Because think about the O&W. The idea was to build a railroad that would go from New York Harbor to Oswego, because Oswego at one point was very important. It's kind of like explaining to kids nowadays why it was so important to have high-speed trains to Buffalo. And then they say, why would you want to go to Buffalo? Well, because it was the major debarking point for the Great Lakes, to get to Lake Erie, Lake Huron, Lake Michigan. So Oswego was a major shipping port at the time. I mean, the Lehigh Valley had the Elmira Cortland Northern that ran up there. The O&W serves it. The New York Central, Rome Watertown, and Ogdensburg had tracks that went there.
The idea was to bypass St. Lawrence River when they went there.
Yeah, well, and then of course the St. Lawrence Seaway didn't help either. That took a lot of traffic away, but back then it was so important to have that. And the problem with the O&W, even though it started out in the 1870s, in some ways it got beaten to the punch. So it wanted to go to Syracuse, but Syracuse said, we're not buying your bonds. You already have the New York Central. You already have the West Shore. You know, although they did build the Syracuse and Shenango to connect with the O&W down in Earlville, which is where O&W passenger trains could make connections to take people all the way to Buffalo and Chicago. So the O&W basically went where people would buy the bonds, which is why they went to a lot of small towns. And that was fine until the 20s, when people started driving cars and trucks and roads began getting improved. And then people said, why do I need to be on a schedule of a train when I can just get in my own car and drive to go see my cousin or my aunt or go to the store whenever I want to? So that was when a lot of the business on branch lines, not just the O&W, but a lot of the branch lines started to suffer at that point. And let's face it, some of these roads would have gone bankrupt in the 40s. The thing that saved them was World War II, because the government said, well, we're going to ration gas. So you got to take the train if you want to go somewhere. So that was actually a shot in the arm for a lot of the railroads. But the O&W was bankrupt basically because anthracite coal shipments were way down. They had a magazine that they published briefly in the early 40s, which I think they called The Observer, after our Observer was modeled after that. But if you look at those reprints, almost every other page, there's an ad saying, buy more coal. You know, burn more coal, buy more coal. Well, look what happened to all these railroads that ran into the coal, and they all went bankrupt at one point or another and had to be reorganized. So, like I said, it's sort of the Elvis Presley of railroads. It's been gone for so long, and you would think that at some point people would lose interest in it. And yet you have people modeling it. Guys like Mal Houck, who does spectacular models, takes his own kit parts and machines them and builds, you know, 260s, 280s, models of diesels, people building the stations. We have members. We have one guy on our Facebook page from Japan who's obsessed with the O&W FTs. Every time he posts a picture, he goes crazy for him. So I don't really get it. But again, having lived near where the right-of-way was, And, you know, having relatives explain what the O&W was about, I guess I caught the fever. And my son, you know, he bought me, and I was gonna wear it tonight. I didn't have the nerve to put it on. This is my Christmas present from, last year from him. So, it's a little warm in here. I would have put it on if it wasn't so warm, but this is, when we were out, whenever we get out of the car, we would put this on a stand next to the car. And one person went up and said, what's that? The road
looks
highway
like a
department or
pickup.
something? I said, oh yeah, we're doing surveying, you know. This is the name of our company. So anyway, thank you all for coming tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. And maybe I'll get a chance to do another presentation for you at some point.
Wonderful.
Yes, yes.
The late Hal Karstens had a large collection of O&W, I guess, HO gauge stuff. Any idea whatever happened to it all?
The guy that would know where all that went is unfortunately left us last year. So Mike was, you know, because he worked with Hal. Yeah, he would know where all that went. I don't know. But thank God Hal shot films of O&W excursions. So, but and by the way, there's a station in St. Joseph's, New York. It's still there. That had a satellite dish on it for a long time. I went by there not too long ago. It's vacant. It's boarded up. I was going to just ask casually who owns it if they wanted to sell it. The right of way is still clean right through the front of it.
Last station on the Monticello.
What's that?
Well, besides Monticello, last station on that branch.
Yep, yeah, until Monticello, exactly. All right.
Question.
Oh, and more questions.
My
Yes.
best friend in college married a fellow from Rosco. And he always referred to the Ontario and Western as the old and weary.
Yep.
So is that a common?
Yeah, the old and weary, the old woman, yep. Yeah. They, you know, the expression dollar short, day late.
Sorry?
The old expression that they're a dollar short and a day late. That was pretty much a description of the O&W for the last 20 years of its operation. It was, like I said, running on a shoestring. If you look at pictures, when they were running the diesels and they're, you know, at the different stations, you'll see grass growing up. You know, it looks like the place isn't being taken care of. The stations were being closed, being torn down. They're doing everything they could. Because remember, railroads paid a lot of property taxes on all that stuff, on the tracks and on the stations. So what do? Well, if you don't have passengers, get rid of the station. A little shut up or just say no station.
The Rosco station, one of the ones that did the dust.
Yeah, it's gone. I found a picture from one of the railroad magazines at an antique shop. It was some humorous cartoon about somebody working in a station. I remember what it was. And on the back of it, it said stolen from, and the guy's name, station agent Rosco. So I think I gave that to the O&W Society. I'm not sure where it wound up, but yeah, you gotta love this railroad because it just struggled for so long. And then it finally, the judge said, enough is enough, as was pointed out. The Erie wanted to run parts of it. New York Central took over parts of it. There was a group that wanted to keep the line going, and they were going to put a lot of money up to do it. And he said, no, shut it down, sell the equipment, pay off the bondholders. That's the end of it.
And they kept all of their branches until the end, which is the craziest part. You think that the Fort Jervis, Monticello Branch, Kingston Branch
Yep.
go online business.
Yeah, they closed any of it.
They cannibalized some of those branches, but the entire thing stayed.
Well, the only branch-
Service.
The only branch they got rid of was the one they sold.
New Berlin branch.
Yeah, the Unadilla branch. Yeah, which followed them, shut down 3 years later.
1960.
Yeah, because of trucks. So, all right, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It has become a cult.
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much, Peter. That was an awesome presentation. We don't get a lot of O&W presentations down here in the South.
But it's part of the tri-state.
Absolutely. So thank you everyone for coming out. Our next meeting will be on June 13th, the second Thursday in June on the Northeast Corridor. So thank you and have a good night.
Yeah.
Let's delete that from the.